Good. So welcome again to our budget discussion forum. On behalf of my council colleagues and myself, we're thrilled that you're either tuning in or here today. We're going to ask our Director of Finance, Marcus Hewitt, to run us through some assumptions that are really critical to what is a four-year budget process. So as a council, we've decided this year that a multi-year budgeting exercise will be very useful, especially as a high-growth municipality where there's a lot of need and requirement for longer-term capital investments. It'll be important for us to go beyond one budget cycle and really look into the future. And that will also support the planning exercise in terms of some of those major expenditures that are anticipated. So thank you, Marcus. And I'll pass it over to you for a higher level presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pecker. And thank you to everyone who's watching or who made it this afternoon. As the Mayor alluded to, the purpose of the presentation today is to give you an overview of what some of the considerations are as staff prepare the multi-year budget, bring it a little bit more to home in terms of what that means specifically for municipal taxation and for you as a resident, to then walk through some of the deliverables that we have over the upcoming months to adopt the multi-year budget, and then we'll turn it over to Council to answer any questions or concerns that you may have. So this slide demonstrates what the high-level considerations are as we embark on the draft budget from an administration point of view. These are the types of considerations that are made. The first one being levels of service. The levels of service represent the commitment of resources made from the municipality to deliver expected services to residents and business owners year over year. This helps establish the baseline for what the budget is. One of the ways that we look to determine what the levels of service are and what the cost will be is to take a look at historically what are the levels of service that were provided, as well as what was the commitment that had been made in the past by council and how much it costs to deliver these services. This must not only be considered for the existing population, but we also need to consider what the impact will be from growth. So maintaining the existing levels and accommodating future levels, both of this adds pressure on municipal resources. For example, operating costs to maintain existing and new infrastructure, human resource pressures, etc. All of these types of considerations around levels of service need to be built into the four-year budget process. One of the other inputs that we need to consider, one of the other pressures, are inflation and historical trends and historical increases in certain costs. The cost of goods and services are rising, both from a construction and personal consumer price index. One of the phenomena that we've been seeing this past year related to this has been supply and demand for contractors providing capital work for some of the capital projects for the municipality. We've seen an increase in the demand for some of the work, especially in neighboring municipalities and certain weather disaster events. And we've seen an increase this past year in some of the funding that was granted to municipalities to address some of these capital costs. But the problem is that the supply of contractors has remained the same. So we have seen in certain instances shortages and increases in capital costs. So to the best of our ability, these are the types of considerations that need to be considered and forecasted into the long-term, the four-year budget. One of the other considerations, as the Mayor mentioned at the beginning, is because we are embarking on a multi-year budget process, we're really trying to assess what needs to be done from a fiscal sustainability perspective. So to ensure that we don't only have enough resources for the next year, but to start looking out 5 to 10 years down the road to make sure that we have everything in place to be able to sustainably afford and pay for these levels of service. We have multiple plans to assist us to this end. In addition to the budgeting process that we're embarking upon, we also have an asset management plan, a long-term financial plan, and of course we're working from the direction of the council work plan. And so these types of documents give us guidance in terms of what resources we are going to need, and it helps us plan for the future. It also ensures that we're able to start building reserves for future needs to ensure that the tax levy is at a sustainable rate and that we're not taking on too much debt into the future to pay for these types of items. The last consideration that we have up here on the slide is really public engagement. So as your municipality, your council wants to ensure that your voice is integrated into this budget. This type of public engagement, of course, comes from the council work plan, which in part is a reflection of what was heard in the community and is presented as a vision for the future. A lot of the departmental master plans and studies, most of these do contain public engagement as well. We also have public discussions like the informal ones that we're having today and other presentations in the future that will take place at committee of the whole and council meetings. And we have the community requests as well and deputations that can be made from the residents and business owners in the area to share with council what some of the pressures are that they are seeing and some ideas that they have to provide input on. We're now going to change gears a little bit to focus specifically on taxation. As you're aware, property taxes in the municipality are calculated based on the assessed value from MPAC and multiply that by this individual rates that are set by us at the municipal level. The province sets the educational rates and the United Counties of Leeds of Grenville sets the county tax rate. So the combination of those three rates multiplied by the assessed property value is what determines ultimately the property taxes. This is based on the 2019 residential tax assessment, and it shows that of the overall tax bill that is received, how this is divided up between those three levels. 50% of the property taxes goes towards the municipality, 31% goes towards the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, and 19% goes towards the education rate. This graph shows, based upon just the municipal portion, where those dollars are going. This doesn't look at the water and sewer and building department budget because those budgets are siloed. That is that they are funded from the rates for those particular items, whereas these are funded from the tax levy specifically. As you can see, about 42% of the overall municipal tax levy portion goes towards public works, 16% goes towards police services, and 18% goes towards the parks, recreation, and culture. This is a breakdown from that last pie chart that you saw on what this means for you as a taxpayer on a monthly basis, where these tax dollars are going and what this ultimately looks like in terms of dollars and cents. So this calculation is done for simplicity based on a $100,000 assessment. You'll note that the 2019 amount is representing $593.29 on a $100,000 assessment, and that would be a 1.5% rate increase from the 2018 levels. All of the amounts, groups here on the left-hand side under the municipal services, that represents the operating budget. So that would be the materials and supplies, the human resource costs, the debt for the particular groups as well. And there at the second last row, you see the transfers to reserves or capital projects. So this represents outside of the operating budget, the amount that is being spent either directly on capital projects in that year or the amount that is being saved in reserves for future needs. This slide here provides a demonstration of what the capital costs would be for the municipality in its entirety, so not just the amount that's funded from taxation. But you can see in 2019, the capital budget for the municipality was approximately $6.7 million, 50% of that going towards public works, 30% towards water and sewer, and 10% of that amount going towards parks, recreation, and culture. And finally, we have a timeline here that we wanted to share on the budgeting process for 2020. I should say for the 4-year multi-year budget process. Right now, we are doing the discussion forums. The next step after this will be the submission deadline for the community request, which is on November 21st. On the North Grenville's website, there is the form that's available for the public to fill out and submit by the 21st. Presentations to council on these requests will be made on November 26th and 7th. On December 3rd, that's when the decision will be made on these requests and direction will be given to staff on what to incorporate into the budget. On December 10th, there's going to be an initial draft presented to council, and on the Wednesday, December 18th, that's when council is going to specifically provide direction to staff based on the initial draft that we have. Into the new year on Wednesday, January 8th, that's when the second draft is going to be presented to council, and on the 14th, that's when the direction from that second draft will be provided. The target adoption date right now for the multi-year budget would be on Wednesday, January 22nd at a regular council meeting. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to Mayor Nancy Peckford, and we can open it up to the informal discussion.
Okay, so you can see sort of the general landscape. Certainly council has had a lot of discussion in recent months about some major capital investments, including twinning of our sewage treatment plant, which is not insignificant. So that and some other capital investments are major considerations for this and other budgets. I think, Jill, are we able to sit down, or do we have to stand because of the camera? We can sit down. I'll invite Deputy Mayor Jim McManaman to make any additional comments on what we think that multi-year landscape looks like. Obviously, we feel that because of how the community is growing and some of the investments that are required, anticipating beyond 1 year and going into a 4-year budget cycle is very worthwhile. But I'll pass it over to Jim for comment before we open it up.
Okay, I guess when I ran my campaign, as an accountant or past, I said, you know, it's important that we look at more long-term, where the municipality was looking at 1 year at a time. So that doesn't give you a lot of forethought to what's might be coming down the pipe. So 4 years will give us at least an idea where we're projecting. And the idea also was that when we came into council, and any new councils that come in, they basically hit the ground right away. They got to go into budget, and that's what we did when we first got elected. December 1st was officially when we were sworn in, and then within a very short period of time, we had to get up to speed on a budget. That was comfortable for me, but not necessarily for everybody. So what I suggested that we do a 4-year from that point when we finished the first year, which we already did. So if you think 4 years from now, we will be either still in office, elected again, or a new council will be in place, and they'll have a 1-year buffer of that 4th year of the budget, where the election will be 3 years from now, so 4 years. So anyways, that's what was the thinking behind that, and also to kind of smooth out the budget process as well, to see what's happening, what the assets are, or what will be needed to move on. So that's kind of the background. If there's any questions, that's why we're here. Again, you saw the outline. We've got quite a few sessions that we are going to provide for public going forward. And this year, I believe we added 1 extra. And last year, we added 1 extra over the last council. So we actually have 2 extra sessions that we're doing. We're doing these informal. So We have, of course, the people who come here yourselves, and then anybody who's going to be watching on, I believe it's Facebook Live that we're doing. So anyways, so we'll, I guess, open it up to questions if you have any for us or for our Director of Finance.
And maybe, Councillor Barkley, you may want to speak to our major public works investment on the horizon, which is the twinning of the sewage plant, right? Which is a major capital endeavor, among others, certainly that we've had to contend with as a new council because of capacity issues. Councillor Barkley is our liaison for public works, and I think it might be interesting to share some of what we're dealing with.
Contrary to some of the concerns of people out in the community, we're not in danger. We just had a yellow flag raised in terms of future capacity. So according to the Ministry of the Environment, we need to maintain 80% or less in our wastewater treatment plant. We're currently at 65, so we still have lots of capacity. But these things take time to plan, and given the rate of growth, we need a long runway in order to get the ball rolling to construct enough wastewater treatment to handle the capacity we anticipate in 8-10 years. So we're at the early stages right now, looking at ways to twin the plant in terms of stormwater containment. As more runoff happens, as we build houses and pave roads, drainage, a lot of the water is currently going into the wastewater treatment system off of roofs tied into the sewage system. So we're looking at a program to disconnect those. And the amount of capacity and the amount of wastewater we have to treat will go up over time. So we're at the early stages right now. We have to look at a number of different emerging technologies as well as the design of this plant. So we've already had one environmental assessment, one public meeting where the plan for twinning the plants has been discussed, and the public has provided feedback. We're looking at, right now it's a D-class estimate of 30 million. A D-class estimate means plus or minus 30%, so we're talking about anywhere from, do the math, 20 to 40. Yeah, so it's a large investment, but in order to keep growing, we're going to have to make it. And again, we've got a long runway to get there, but we're at the early stages of doing the plans and figuring out how we're going to do it.
In terms of the funding, is there any government programs or grants available to the province? Infrastructure.
Yeah, we actually presented to officials with the Ministry of Infrastructure provincially this past August as part of the Ontario Municipalities Association annual meetings. So we certainly made the case that as a municipality, our staff for several years seeking to optimize efficiencies within the current sewage treatment plant. We're well positioned fiscally, generally as a high growth community, but we are looking to seek any investment and financial partnership opportunity from the province or the feds. That landscape is evolving, certainly at the provincial level. So it didn't appear that there was much to offer, but there is now an announcement about infrastructure funding for smaller communities when it comes to wastewater, which is important. So we've queued the province to our want to maximize, right, and seize any opportunities. Of course, we also have County Road 43, and as I think most of you know, the province has in fact selected that project for its share of bilateral funding with the federal government to the tune of, in total, it would be an $8.8 million investment in County Road 43, with the municipality providing just over $1 million for a certain section of the expansion of County Road 43. That process is near the finish line. We do need the federal government to give it the green light so that all the money flows, even at the provincial level, because it's a shared bilateral province federal pot of money. But that, of course, when we first got elected, was the priority, to make sure that Minister Clark, who's been a long champion, right, a long-standing champion for County Road 43, the municipality and the counties, which owns that road, all did their part to make sure that we got the right political engagement and the approvals necessary. So we're waiting on that federal approval. Once we know that money is secure, it will kind of free us up to, I think, aggressively go after other infrastructure dollars when it comes to water and sewer. But the realities are, overwhelmingly, the burden of that project is ours, right? Even with a $5 or $10 million investment, if we were so lucky, we would still overwhelmingly, right, bear the burden as taxpayers. So it's been a big discussion item amongst council and senior staff, in part because it eats up our borrowing. We would need to borrow for most of that money, and that obviously comes with costs. But if we're going to continue to grow, even in a very well-managed, sustainable way, that capacity needs to be created. I know Councillor O'Sullivan Councillors O'Sullivan and I both sit on the Police Services Board, another big investment for our community, and she sits on the Library Board, so she just wanted to add a few words on that reality.
Thank you. As you know, there's a lot of changes in funding that's coming down from the province, and it's not additional funding in many cases.
Please just come over so you can...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
So the library, for example, had funding cuts and certainly hasn't had any increase in the amount of provincial dollars that comes to the library. And the funding cuts certainly affected interlibrary loans. And the board meeting is tonight, but I've had a look at the first draft budget for a 4-year plan for the library, and the reality is that with new technology, the e-books cost more, and yet there's a demand for e-books, and interlibrary loan, we have to pay for mailing those, even though there's currently a good rate from Canada Post, but that's not guaranteed to last. So we have to mail books back and forth if we're getting them from another library branch in Ontario. The other thing is the Police Services Board. We're waiting for the results of the police survey that was done on how municipal residents feel about the level of service they get from the OPP. And there is a possibility of wanting to enhance the amount of hours that OPP spend in North Grenville. So that will have to be figured into the budget as well. And as the liaison for Parks, Recreation and Culture, we know that there are a lot of additional and enhancements to parks and recreation facilities and programming that with a growing community we need to provide for the new families and the people who are living here, including improving sidewalks, and we've already done that. That would be part of the public works budget, but a lot of it comes out from the community assessments, the advisory committees, and there's work to be done in terms of accessibility, sidewalks that need to be fixed up so that they're wheelchair friendly, etc. So a lot of things to look at coming down.
So why don't we pass it over to you for any questions or comments you might have at this stage. So I'm just going to pass the mic over. Again, just because we are taping, we're using the mic so that residents who can't be here today can watch this later.
What about your bedroom communities, and how does that apply to your sewage and water treatments? And then further, you mentioned contractors are a hard thing to get hold of in this area. I believe that a smoother transfer of permits and permissions would alleviate that and help that considerably.
Two questions. I'll give you the permits. Bedroom communities, how does that affect our wastewater treatment plant? Well,
the plan thereof.
The infrastructure is built by the developer. The developer is responsible for putting in the sewer mains and the water mains. And at a certain point, once it's built according to specifications and inspected, the municipality assumes it. Now, every home that's built
Are you
is,
talking about the hamlets?
Pardon?
Are you talking about the hamlets as a bedroom community?
No.
no, you're talking about the new developments.
I'm talking about the future use of Glenview homes further west
okay.
and maybe joining on the Equinell, on the back side of that, more than circling around.
So that's the capacity, that's the future capacity,
Maybe 10 years on,
Yeah.
or maybe more.
that's the future capacity that we're anticipating, and we're starting to make plans to accommodate that wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah.
But the actual infrastructure is built by the developer. As well, they're charged per door, a certain development charge, and some of that money is
Yeah, well,
used.
further to my own, while I wander around and I look at, on wandering around and looking at various things, I see on what used to be across from where I've lived at one time, indication of somebody perhaps planning a subdivision of that sort. They have test wells and this and that at hand that I have found. And I'm not sure who actually is involved with it or that, but it's west of Cranberry Hill, considerably. And me just living in the area and with nothing much to do, I look at all this wonderful stuff. Sometimes I talk to Barkley here. Do you have anything to say, Bart?
Are you finished?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Hollis. I guess I'm a retired senior, and I guess I see things slightly different than some of the new families that come down here, the millenniums and whatnot. And I guess that's a major challenge for the people who are charged with preparing a budget, is trying to fit everybody in. And I agree with a lot of what Councillor O'Sullivan was saying about, well, what is it that seniors do, actually? They walk a lot, and they look around, and they meet, and they shop, and they go to the library, which is terrific. And some of us, we skate here in the public, adult skating, which is an absolutely great program. Some of us, myself included, take advantage of the swimming pool in the summertime, which is great too. And there are tons of trails around here. You got the Ferguson Forestry Center, natural features, the Limerick Forest, Kenfield Creek, and the transport, the advisory committee, the trails, used to be the trails committee, what is it now, Doreen?
Active transportation.
Active Transportation has done a great job giving us a trails network. So it's my opinion we don't really need a lot more trails, and recreational facilities are pretty good here now. I noticed the budget for Parks and Rec was 18%, I think, or something of that nature. It's fairly high in my opinion. I would like to see more money go into infrastructure, fixing up the sidewalks so seniors can get through with their walkers, and fixing up the swimming pool a little bit in terms of the facilities thereof. A little more traffic enforcement would be great. A little more police presence would be great. Pine Hill is, I think the speed limit and the stop signs are just a suggestion on Pine Hill. So my thought would be to swing more towards the infrastructure side and less to the Parks and Rec, but that's my opinion.
I just a point of clarification, and then I'll pass it over to Councillor Sullivan. Much of the parks, overwhelmingly, our Parks and Rec budget is financing this building. So when this building was built 10, 12 years ago, the financing arrangement for the municipality to take it on was quite significant. So it looks like it's a big piece of the municipal pie, but much of it is not negotiable. We are $3 million plus on this building a year. $1 million in revenues through rental space, ice time, etc. But much, unfortunately, in fact, it constrains how we spend on Parks and Rec, quite frankly, because the municipal building eats up a huge amount of that capacity. So we've, I think, actually, as a municipality, been very, very modest and careful with other Parks and Rec expenditures, and really tried to capitalize on external funding programs just by virtue of the building. I'll pass it over to Councillor O'Sullivan. The other piece though, before I do, is we are talking traffic enforcement at the North Grenville Police Services Board and looking at how to structure the next contract with the OPP so that we do achieve, I think, the kind of visibility that, so George Street being an excellent example, we've had a number of residents reach out to us about increasing police presence and or putting in new stop signs just because of the fact that that road, parts of that road are used as, I think, an alternative to County Road 43. So as the community has changed, I know the Police Services Board, just yesterday, we've been having that conversation. I'll pass it over to Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks. And Barclay, when you were on the Active Transportation / Trails Committee, we certainly did make good roads in terms of enhancing what we already had. And I think the challenge right now is, with limited resources, that we make more connections.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted to walk to or ride a bike to Colonnade Mall, until there was a stop sign at Bryans-Well Road, it was insane. So making some more connections between the existing trails, and that's what we would focus on, what we already have.
So Barclay, I love that name. I could have been called Barclay, perhaps. There's a lot there in your comments, and it's very familiar to this council because we heard it all through the election, the kind of concerns that you expressed. So we've been working on it. Just to echo what the mayor said, as far as this building in the Parks and Rec budget, I think it's close to $800,000 in financing costs on an annual basis that until 2030 or 2035, something like that. And even then we have some of the principal to pay off at that point. So we're locked into that. There's nothing we can do. So it kind of inflates that pie chart a little bit. So it's not really reflective of the sort of the ongoing operational costs and our plans to change infrastructure, etc. I can tell you, as far as sidewalks go, it's a priority for this council. And active transportation, definitely, for the reasons you stated. Seniors are out and walking, and young families are out walking as well.
Crossing 43 is a hazard, certainly.
Yes, well, and once someone signs a check in Ottawa, we're going to start working on expanding that road and making sure that the crossing for pedestrians are taken care of. Right now, it's next to impossible. You take your life in your hands.
Mr. McMahon was going to answer permits and permissions. Permits and permissions ongoing here.
Yeah.
And
I just want to wrap up, and we're keeping it all up here. We are just starting to embark on a review of our traffic calming policy and our speed reduction policy. Right now, staff, is limited to what would warrant a traffic calming device. And there's this whole slew of them out there. We're also looking in Public Works at what we call the Gateway Signage Project, which would take a neighborhood approach as you enter a neighborhood, coming off a collector road into a residential section, whether it's an older residential neighborhood or whether it's one of these new developments, of reducing it down to 40. So once we take a good hard look at speed limits, then we can look at traffic calming, and those policies are under review, and they'll be adjusted to better reflect what's going on in this community. Permits.
I think there's a little confusion on that question, because I believe what our Director of Finance was mentioning about contractors, those are the contractors we hire or tender out to do work here for us, is where we're having trouble, correct?
Yep.
So that's
It comes to the availability of the contractors.
yes, but these are the tenders that we put out to try to get people to do work within our. So it's not the construction people who are looking for a building permit and or doing planning development from developers. That's a whole different issue, and really those contractors speak to what Public Works is trying to do in putting those tenders out. But on the planning and building side, we are working on lots of changes there as well to smooth out the building and the permits and whatnot. We are running into struggles because when you have a a lack of capacity when it comes to sewer systems, and then again, it slows things down because we have to issue it in a certain way, and we're working on a new bylaw for that. So growth is wonderful, but it's also a challenge at the same time.
So we'll do another round. Would you like to?
No, I'm good for now.
Okay.
More recently, I was walking up George Street and watched a survey crew testing for how deep the rock was, and their advisory story was that they had to go down 25 feet. They got a 1.5 feet down the hip dolomite, if I understand right. And I don't think that they quite achieved their 25 feet.
Well, it's obvious that the appetite for growth here, certainly among certain developers, is quite strong. But of course, they are limited to what is feasible and viable. And I think, since getting elected, part of our mandate is to look seriously at how that growth happens and making sure that we can support that growth to the degree that is feasible for this community, given fiscal realities and certainly other realities in terms of quality of life and community cohesion. We just recently introduced a development charges bylaw that will take effect soon, and certainly that bylaw really places some of the burden of growth on the development community, which has been the case now for a number of years in North Grenville. So that will help to alleviate some of those bigger costs, like our sewage treatment plant, but it doesn't answer all of the call in terms of those sorts of investments. But I think certainly as a council, one of the things we did over the last few months is we created a council work plan with 3 distinct themes, one of which was safe and sustainable, or I should say as sustainable and smart growth. Second was healthy, cohesive, and safe communities. And third was collaborative leadership. So those are the big umbrellas under which we're attempting to work, while at the same time keeping our tax rates relatively manageable for residents in this community. So it's a part of it's certainly a part of the considerations for our 2020 budget and beyond. Some have asked about the implications of provincial cuts to our realities here at the municipality, and a lot of the announced cuts to things like paramedic services, early childhood education, community and social services, those cuts affect the county's budget, into which obviously every North Grenville resident and business owner pays. But the province, to be fair, has stepped back from some of those changes, recognizing that their impact on municipal and county governments was quite significant and often adverse. So as our municipality embarks upon our budget process, I sit at the county's table, and we're doing exactly the same thing at the county's table. And the good news is that some of the cuts that have been announced in June will not take effect to the same extent, or there's been a real adjustment to where the province is willing to continue to cost share, as it should for certain services. Maybe I'll ask council colleagues, and we can start with Deputy Mayor and go down the line, to give any highlights for our 2020 budget. We've talked about, obviously, the expanding capacity at the water and sewer plant. Is there anything else, Jim, you want to mention outside of what we've already discussed already about some of even the innovations here at the municipality in terms of systems upgrades and making sure that our service levels, for example, and our client services experience is a good one? Maybe I'll pass it over to you and we'll go down the line.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe you covered most of it. But definitely, I'm looking forward to the 4-year implementation of this budget. See what it looks like when we get the draft. I look forward to that. And of course, then the tweaking starts, right? And so I look forward to tweaking. But one thing I found within the municipality in the last year that they really are fallen down, or we have fallen down on a lot of technology and a lot of other types of services within the municipality, within the organization itself, to run more efficiently and better. In my own, in my working life, I work with businesses on software and work plan and different types of planning processes. And the software really, tends to help us in a big degree. And an organization of this size, you can just imagine a small item like a service call on Public Works, that could end up in an email, it could end up on a spreadsheet, but it can end up also being lost. And so if we have a better process to track those kind of things, that's what we're looking for in the next year or so. So I look forward to the process and what it looks like over the next 4 years, managing the tax rate, making sure our reserves are protected and continue to grow at a reasonable rate, and things like that. So I'll pass this then to Doreen.
Thank you. I think for the Department of Parks, Rec and Culture, the same thing applies in terms of having good technology and programs where people can go online and register for swimming lessons and register for programs that go on in the summer for their kids. And also for hockey and booking ice time and booking rooms here. If there's an online system, it makes it fair, it makes it equitable for anybody who wants to book a room. And having those kinds of procedures and policies available to people online are just a start. We've made good progress in terms of programming with the YMCA being involved for summer programming and for kids, and that's been a really good move forward. And I think just working with what we already have and enhancing them and making them more efficient and effective is a good first step, but it takes money for the technology to bring us up to speed.
And I should just add, before passing it over to Councillor Barkley, that we have received some modernization funding from the province of Ontario. It was part of their early investment, if you will, in municipalities. So to that end, we've received approximately $600,000 to look at modernizing our systems, creating efficiencies, responding better to the public, and Council is working hard alongside our senior management team to think about what the best use of those dollars are. The province is expecting that municipalities use those modernization funds to modernize. So not for general operating, not to just sort of throw it in the pot, but to really be very strategic and I think forward-thinking about how those dollars are used. So that gives us a little bit of marge to maneuver. We also received a doubling of the federal gas tax money this past spring. That is typically earmarked for public works capital projects and transit projects. So certainly there's been some dialogue about piloting a municipal transit system, not a full-on transit system, but a modest, sustainable transit system that could service potentially Hamlets and the town of Grenville, but very much on a trial basis to figure out what the needs are in the community, how do we keep it affordable and sustainable, and not, of course, run that service at the expense of other critical capital projects. Now over to you, Councillor Barkley.
So what I wanted to add was, where does the money come from? It doesn't all come from residential taxes, property taxes. It's been mentioned, we talked about development charges, and there are certain line items in the budget that are eligible to be funded in part by development charges, and those are identified in our budget. As the mayor mentioned, we've received some provincial grants, and I guess they're federal? No, just provincial. But we're working diligently to identify additional sources of funding out there. We're not going to leave any grant unapplied for. In fact, we just submitted a grant for the revitalization of Riverside Park, that'd be funding over 7 years to really bring it up to what was envisioned a couple of years ago when we did the master plan. So there's development charges. The residential tax rate is approximately half of what the business tax rate is, and so the focus is on trying to shift the burden off the residential taxpayer by increasing the businesses that situate themselves here in North Grenville. 90% of property tax is residential, and only 10% comes from the business property tax. So if we can increase the number of businesses that move in here, it's great for employment, it's great to decrease some of the burden on the residential taxpayer. So development charges, as is mentioned by Marcus in his presentation, they're silo budgets that are basically user fees for water and wastewater within the urban center. There's the building charges, so the building department is self-financed through user fees. So not everything comes out of the residential taxpayer. And you know, we've done a lot over this last year in terms of taking a look at development charges and how to rejig them so that, you know, we're looking forward to future growth and how to sustain that. So I just wanted you to make aware that it's not all coming out of the residential property owner. There are other ways of funding our growth.
Thankfully.
Another thing that we're doing and looking at to improve efficiency is, for example, the MDS, which is the Municipal Drug Strategy that we're mandated to have. And with the help of the Leeds Grenville Lanark Public Health Department, we're working with them and with other municipalities so that we're not all doing the same thing, that we can share resources and come out with similar municipalities that have the same issues with respect to drugs, and to get this municipal drug strategy going. So that's one way we're collaborating, as well as the library is collaborating with the SOLS, the South Ontario Library System, and working together, sharing policies and procedures so that it's more efficient, that we get everything up to speed and current. And the Active Transportation Advisory Committee is also working with the Public Health Department for active school transportation. And so they all work together in terms of how we can come up with the plan that's more effective and efficient.
Any final comments from your perspective? Maybe we can cue people to that deadline again, November 21st, for budget submissions. Any final comments over here? Good.
Thank you. Mayor Peckford, you talked about provincial cuts, and where I sit on the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority Board, you're no doubt aware that the Ford government has imposed a number of cuts to the Conservation Authority's programs. In terms of the levy, it's been cut in half, and we're doing our budgeting process now for 2020 based on, the only way we can do it is based on what we've done in the past until we get further word from the province on what the changes are going to be to the Conservation Authorities Act. But at some point in time, there may be a need for council and municipality to take a look at exactly what services that they require from the conservation authorities and how much they're willing to pay for, because a lot of the rhetoric so far is focused on the core mandate of the conservation authorities, which is basically regulation, flood control, and parks and recreation. And so a lot of the other work, about another half of the work, comes on behalf of the municipalities. So the time will come, and we're hoping that municipalities will support our services as they have in the past.
Yeah, thank you for the cue to that, because you're absolutely right. Conservation authorities have been particularly hard hit. And I think we have a great appreciation for the work that both the Rideau Valley and South Asian Conservation Authorities do in the municipality and its surrounding areas, and it would be a significant loss. So I think you can fully expect our support, and please do keep us apprised, because it's important for us to understand that landscape.
Your levy will be around $94,000.
Okay. All right. All right, good to know. Anything else? No, we're good? Okay. So November 21st is that drop dead date for anybody watching, or any of you who would like to officially submit a budget request. I think last year we had about 40, I want to say. 20? About 20, okay. So we had about 20 last year in terms of formal budget submissions for particular requests by community groups. Some of them had been in the works for a long time, and some of them were newer. So we really are aiming for that January 22nd adoption of our 2020 four-year budget. So our timelines are fairly ambitious. You can find the form for a community budget submission on the website or here at the municipality. And Marcus, do we have the whole timeline for how this council is deliberating over the budget process on our website?
Yes.
Okay, good. And you would find that just by going to northgrenville.ca? Awesome. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. We're very happy to have an audience and to have some very good questions. So you made it work today. Thank you.